Hi, welcome to the Powerful Marketers channel. This is the place where we share inspiration and insights for the marketers. I am your host, Mari-Liis Vaher, and today I am talking to Annette Kramer about how I can be really impressive online. So with a PhD and a wealth of commercial experience, Annette uses practical techniques to help individuals translate the value of what they do to build high value relationships. In short, Annette is an expert strategist and problem solver, particularly in joining the dots with what initially looked like disparate resources. She has become one of my very good friends, and I'm so excited to have you here today with us. Welcome, Annette.
Thank you very much.
So just for those who are listening to us and who doesn't know about your background, please briefly share with us about who you are and how you have grown into the expert you are today.
Well, I don't know if I guess I'm an expert. Age has made me into an expert. I mean, age and experience. As you said, I started as I started in the theater as a dramaturg and an acting coach. And then I became an academic and I taught at Brown University, critical thinking in particular, and drama. And then I went on to the business world, particularly the web, when it was inventing itself in the early days in New York, and carried on. And I think my interest is in pattern recognition because academics is very, very narrow and deep, and business is very, very broad and shallow. Mm-hmm. So you've got the same kinds of problems repeating themselves over and over and over again in business in a way that you don't necessarily in academics. You have to be really focused, or you have to be very knowledgeable about, very specific areas of content in academics. Whereas in business, the business problems tend to repeat themselves. And so, again, sort of the critical thinking teaching that I did and the considering how to even teach or define critical thinking has served me very well, I think, in business.
Wow, I love your theater background. How you do you see some similarities, theater, business?
Yeah, well, I explain to business people the value of theater people by saying that we are the engineers of the humanities. We build something out of nothing to a deadline that works. And then we test it and iterate. Wow. So that's what we do. And so we're very, very good at seeing how to do that. The other thing about theater people is that it's a necessarily cross-disciplinary effort, and it's mission driven. So you have to respect other people's leadership. You can't try to control everything. Well, you can try, but the more one individual tries to control everything, the less successful generally the operation is, unless it's a director, and that's a whole other situation. But the lighting people have to respect the people who are doing the scenery and work well with them if the mission is going to be reached. And so it was a very good learning experience for going into business and collaborating across disciplines, which, as we know, is the most effective way to get good innovation.
Wow, love that. So let's talk about building those relationships. Especially, I know you are a great expert helping people to build relationships around them, but as well, we are now pretty much everybody are working in hybrid environments mostly, right? Let's talk about how to build relationships online, especially. So if and how different it is really compared to working face-to-face.
Well, I think that it's a little bit more challenging because you don't have bodies. What you're doing in a screen-to-screen relationship is you are kind of reverse engineering in an invisible way. You're reverse engineering that body-to-body relationship. So I am providing, I don't know if you know that Magritte saying, this is not a pipe, this is an image of a pipe. So this is not you, this is an image of you, right? And I am imposing a kind of corporality and proximity of you, right, to you on it. on this screen-to-screen relationship. So in other words, what I'm doing is I'm pretending we're in the same room. We are face-to-face, but I'm pretending that you have a body and we're in the same room. And I'm doing that in an automatic kind of way because human beings do that. We tend to anthropomorphize the non-human, which a computer is. And so we take the most human aspects of that, which is your image, your voice, that composite, and then we assume that that is what the relationship is. So there's a lot of effort going on before you even start a conversation, just in the being of screen to screen, right? So we get used to it, but there is actually a lot of effort, which is part of the reason I think that we're so tired at the end of a day. It's not just that we've been looking at a screen, but we have been relating to a screen. We have not really been relating to people. We think of it as relating to people, but we're relating to people by inventing them in a way. We're creating some of that. So that's part of it. That's part of the reason that it's challenging. I think one of the other things that's different about it is that it requires a lot more attention. Because if your body's in a room, there's a level of relaxation you can assume in your posture, in your gaze, that indicates nothing. That indicates maybe you're thinking, or it indicates that you are something distracted you. Whereas it becomes more meaningful on a screen-to-screen basis, because if I don't look at you, it looks like I'm not paying attention. It has a different meaning than if I swivel in my chair and we're talking and I'm still talking to you, but I'm turning around and I'm, you can see there's context, right? So you can see whatever it is that's happening, and it doesn't necessarily mean I'm not paying attention to you. So I think that there's both the combination, there's a lot of energy that's going into focusing in a screen-to-screen relationship that is not happening otherwise.
That's a very good point, actually. And is it like usually we unconsciously understand what other body language is saying, right? But over the screen, it's much more harder. Is it?
Yeah, I think we make assumptions about. Okay, we have a lot more experience with people in the real world, right? So we can make assumptions about. It's easier to make assumptions about people in the real world because we have more experience. I started my PhD thesis by saying convention is by definition what we take for granted. Now, in order for conventions to develop and be taken for granted, they have to happen over time. So there's certain conventions on Zoom that we now can take for granted that, say, when the pandemic started, we couldn't. Like the fact that we have to communicate by Zoom. We would never have assumed that. Maybe you pick up the phone, maybe you go meet somebody, right? That's not, so there's certain things that we do take for granted, but I think there's also, it requires more effort to, as you say, it requires more effort to decode what is happening on the other side of the screen. And that becomes complicated or fragmented or made more difficult if there's more than one person on the screen. So if you have a gallery of people on the screen, you're not just relating to one person, you're relating to that one person, and then the relationship between that person and the person next to them and next to them and next to them and below them and so on. And so they're both a hierarchy of priority, right? Because we read from left to right and we have all these other things, but there's also a sort of a situational meaning, because maybe you have someone looking at you and then you have a screen off next to them. Now, what's more salient? Is it the fact that somebody isn't looking at you? Do you care about that more than you care about someone looking at you? There's all of this complex kind of emotional stuff going on that we're just not even thinking about. Do you know what I mean? But that it makes us react.
Yeah, and it drives you crazy, because at the same time, those different people maybe are chatting with you, so you are also multitasking, which is also crazy, and you can't really pay attention. And it's like, I totally agree that it is exhausting, really. After those meetings, you are so tired.
But one of the things I would say that I would correct you when you made a suggestion that I could make you better at or more effective at being on Zoom. I think you are tremendously effective, having seen you only once in a group of people. And
Thank
this
you.
would be a tip, if you want a tip for marketers or a tip for people on Zoom, which is that you put a tremendous effort into, although it doesn't seem like it's effortful, but I know that it requires effort to make people feel welcome, to make people feel heard. When people appear on the screen, or people's images appear on the screen when they tune in, you make an effort to name them by name and ask them a question or mention something about them. And so there's a sense of belonging immediately, and a sense of welcome, and a sense of being heard. Because, in relationships, and this is key to any relationship, being heard, being recognized, being seen is huge for people. It doesn't matter if you're on the screen or you're not on the screen.
I know.
And so that by itself, not talking all the time like I am, but just, making people understand that they're heard and seen and welcome, is a huge thing that a person can do who's leading a meeting, to make people feel more comfortable, to make them feel more relaxed, to make them feel they belong in that group. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I know I'm doing this consciously, usually myself, but at the same time, I feel sometimes that, oh my God, what happens if I forget somebody? If there are many people, so that could be also one thing to think of. But
yeah, so maybe have a list of people's names with their pictures.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you should do your homework first. That's very good. But yeah, I love your help and I love your tips. So how can I be really impressive online? If there are I don't know, there might be, for the marketers, there might be marketer meetings. There are so many people all together. Everybody have ideas, and maybe you even don't have a chance to raise a hand. Or what are the other tips? What to do if you want to be
I think they're the same things that you would do in a room. One of the things that seems pretty clear to me is that people who are good at developing relationships offline tend to be better at developing relationships online. That's not really a surprise, because that's how we relate to people, right? And you're good at that. It's the same thing that you would do in a room where someone isn't speaking. Is you would take a moment and, you do what you do anyway, which is you acknowledge either in the chat or in person that someone said something interesting and so on when they do speak. And when someone isn't speaking, you take a moment and say, call them out and say, I don't know, Joe, you haven't said anything. I know you're really interested in blah, blah, blah. Do you think any of that might be relevant here? And you give them an option, give the person an option to say, no, I don't think so, so that you're not putting them on the spot, but you put it in such a way that invites them to contribute. And sometimes that will allow them to feel comfortable contributing further, or sometimes that's just enough to make them feel more involved.
That's a good tip, especially for the people who are not so active to speak out themselves, but still that they have something important to say. Okay, that's very good. What else do you have? Other tips? All
things that you already do, really. I think.
Yeah, I know that I am doing, but
I think having a level of energy that is, you sort of lending people your energy. As you do, you are energetic and cheerful, and it allows other people to, it sort of is contagious in the way that when you smile, other people tend to smile. If you sneeze, someone sneezes, don't sneeze. And just keeping it light. And I guess a good balance of listening and speaking and making sure people are included. It's just exactly what you do already. How can I tinker with excellence? I don't know. I don't have that much experience with you online, to be honest, but the little that I've had, to me, is, it's very inviting.
Very good. So I should then invite everybody who are watching this video to visit one of our masterminds. Then they can see the tips that I'm using or what we are talking about.
That's a good idea. I think that's a good idea. in terms of the structure of your mastermind, I mean, for me, I mean, it sort of depends on the interest. You're creating a network of people, but there's another format that you could use sometimes, which is to help, is to invite people to solve a problem. It's sometimes it helps people focus the mind, and it helps them not sell themselves or sell something else as much, because we're all sort of geared to, as soon as we're allowed to talk, especially Americans, right? As soon as we're allowed to talk, we start to do our little patter and we sound like a brochure. Not me, but a lot of people. And I think that one way of avoiding that is to allow people to talk about something other than themselves, and actually make it a rule that you don't really talk about your business unless you have an example of something that is relevant to the problem that you're discussing or the challenge that you're discussing.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Maybe you invite people from the room or from the group to offer those challenges, and you can always do breakout rooms or whatever else you do. But I think it helps so that nobody will be selling if that ends up being an issue with you. But I don't know, again, what your issues are, but I do know that when I've been in rooms of particularly marketing and advertising folk, they tend to talk a lot in brochureware.
Yeah, I know that. So let's talk about, you started to talk about a bit already. So let's talk about what not to do in a good online meeting. So I would start with, of course, multitasking, which is like, I can see how people are not paying attention, when they are on the meeting, really, right? You can see that when they are like, I don't know, with their phones or chatting with somebody or sending emails. I think that should be like the one thing to think.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. I agree with that.
What else? What not to do?
Well, I think anything like that makes people not feel heard or not feel important, or who's in the room. I mean, you're typing right now, but I feel like what you're doing is you're taking notes. So I feel more listened to, right? But that's a different thing, right? So but I also know you. So I know you wouldn't be doing that. So yeah, anything that goes into more feeling involved, and that includes keeping your camera on, and it includes, what else? Some sort of visual acknowledgement, because again, there are no bodies in the room. So it's nice if someone nods, if something's, or you write something in the chat that acknowledges some value to what people said, or
thumbs up or something, right?
Anything that's engagement, that demonstrates engagement, I think allows you to be recognized as somebody who is listening, and then generally you are recognized as someone who has value to other people. That's how we negotiate valuable relationships, is engagement, right?
Yeah.
A particular kind of engagement.
I would emphasize the camera part here, because I've been myself into many meetings where people don't show themselves, and it's like weird to be there, to discuss with like only with computer. It's like yeah, it's funny and weird and something like, and you don't feel very comfortable, right? Talking to yourself, really. Yeah, you can hear this voice, but still it's like, oh, okay, why don't you show me who you are? I think
the why is a really good point, right? So when I've been in seminars or webinars or whatever you call them, for example, in Africa, South Africa, and other places in Africa, and they don't have very good Wi-Fi, the reason they keep their cameras off is it allows them to have continuous connectivity, right, or connection. If somebody writes in the box, "Forgive me for having my camera off, my Wi-Fi isn't working," or something, then you feel less uncomfortable because you don't feel like they're hiding, or you don't, that you feel like there's a reason. Again, you feel heard, you feel recognized that this is not a normal way of engaging with other people. So this person is making an effort to demonstrate that he or she is engaged. right? And would be more engaged should technology allow. So I think that's a good thing. So if there's something peculiar about your online situation or your presence, to acknowledge it either in the chat or somehow, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, those are great thoughts here. As you saw, I did some notes, so I will add them next to this video. But if there is somebody listening to us and they would want to connect with you and ask for some additional thoughts or some feedback to their appearance online, how can they find you? What's the best
How
way?
can they find me? Well, I have a website, which you can put in the
I will put it, yeah.
Yeah. And that's probably with an email, and that's probably the best way to get in touch with me. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't tend to link into people I haven't met.
Okay.
Because it's just too hard to manage a network where you don't know people. But yeah, I'm always around. Not always. Well, with the pandemic, I'm always around.
So email is the best way, and
I think email
this
is the best way. Yeah, and then we can take it from there if somebody's interested in getting together. Yeah. So right now, just to give you a kind of a sense of the projects that I'm working on, I am chairing a committee that is an international advisory committee for the government of South Africa for skills and innovation. So we're working on supporting South African entrepreneurs and their way of communicating in all different kinds of ways, but also their thinking process, because communication is so closely tied to thinking. You can't communicate it well if you don't think clearly, right? So it's not one or the other. Right. Well, yeah, but people don't think that way. You think the presentations and then all of a sudden everything's organized, but actually it's thinking. I'm working with quite a few scale-ups, like large startups who are pitching for investment or, entering new markets. A lot of women who feel like they aren't heard in meetings, particularly online. How do they represent themselves? So yeah, I mean, I do all different kinds of work like that. So yeah, I'm around.
Wow, love it. I'm so happy you are around.
And I'm always working with you. So
yeah, I'm so happy to have you. So how would you wrap up this topic for our listeners? So how to build those relationships online? Is there anything you want to add, or just to wrap it up?
Well, I have a tendency to say this, so I don't want to repeat myself over and over. However, I think the most important thing about any communication event, anytime you communicate, is to think about it not as information delivery, as messaging, but as starting a conversation that listeners want to continue to build relationships, because business is based on relationships.
Yeah.
And if you can change your attitude about why you're communicating, how you communicate will change. And I think it'll be easier to engage and you'll get more out of it too.
Wow. I love it, Annette. People are working with people, not with companies, right? So
there you go. And you are who you are, not what you do.
Wow, love it. That's a lovely wrap up here. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts here today. I know it will be much appreciated by many people. So thank you.
And it's always lovely to see you as well.
Likewise.